Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our session on social media and the wine industry. Today, we're going to be presenting from New York City. We are Foundation's marketing group, and we are a New York-based brand development agency. Just to give you a little bit of insight, the areas of focus for us are social and digital media, which is why we're doing this presentation today. We work on creative packaging and design services. We have a ton of PR and events related programs. And of course, we participate in strategic advisory with respect to your sales and brand management. So my name is Monika, and I'm the CEO of Foundation's Marketing Group. I have actually a rather long-standing history in the wine and spirits industry, but I started out in the marketing of products, of consumer products on Madison Avenue, really in the advertising industry. And then I followed that by 10 years of international trade and business promotion. So at this point, I'm going to let you start focusing on the presentation, and we are going to get into the heart of the matter. While we are talking about social media and wine marketing, I think we need to look at where the US wine market is today to better understand the context of the evolution of the market for wineries. We are facing a tremendous amount of brands, and we're also in the midst of continued consolidation. I don't know if anyone had a chance to look at what's been going on over the last few weeks, but we had added consolidation with some of the major players, resulting in about 70% of the market being in the hands of just a few distributors. That is going to create additional challenges for wineries going forward. And they're going to have to think about getting very creative about how they are going to be selling wines and how they are going to be reaching the ultimate consumer. The story is when you have over 140,000 registrations of new cola labels, there is going to be a problem. So with that crowded market in mind, how are you going to communicate and talk about your brand, and how are you going to communicate your story to the consumer? What we see in normal CPG and consumer products, the issue is you create a product, you work and create a product with the consumer in mind. Because there's no point in creating a product that you're not going to be able to sell. And if the product doesn't meet consumer needs, you're not going to be able to sell your product. The difference in the wine industry traditionally has been that wineries are agricultural-based businesses, so they are in the farming industry in many ways, and product is created. A product is grown and created, and the thought is about what can that land produce, what grows well here, and what do we feel is good in this particular product range. There's little thought towards what a consumer in a faraway land is going to desire and want to drink. Wine industry needs to become much more consumer oriented. In other words, thinking about what product will sell these days, given the influx of so many brands from everywhere. In the past, a supplier, producer, winery used to speak to import companies and possibly some distributors. Today, a winery really needs to communicate to all parts of the channel, and in particular, directly to the consumer. The question is, are you doing that? Are you getting that done? If you're a winery in a country in Europe, or how are you communicating with your US consumer base? Do you even know who your US consumer target is? And then, what kind of language, what kind of communication do you have to apply in order to be able to reach that target market? And lastly, and we get this sometimes from wineries around the world, and even domestically, is there a value? And what is the ROI on social media? Do we need it? When we discuss how consumers are learning about wine these days, Most of that conversation, that dialogue is happening online. When you're talking about 2.5 million daily conversations on that topic, and you and your brand are not part of that conversation, that is a problem. There is the word of mouth, which is very, very prevalent today, more so than ever before, because consumers are able to share their thoughts and opinions about your brand without anyone's control. There is no filter. They are not relying on critics as much as they used to in the past, very simply because they can look up information on a wine that will come from actual consumers, other consumers in their network, who will be able to make some recommendations whether a product is going to hit a mark or not. Can you afford to ignore the world of mouth that we're facing? And today's recommendations are less so based on experts and much more so on friends and a local network, an online network. And that is where consumers are really looking to find some sort of an advice or opinion about a product. So, once again, the question is, have you embraced this? Because really, there's no getting around it. When we talk about this many people who are watching wine related videos per month, and you don't have a video that's in play about your brand, then you're missing a significant segment of the market. There is a thought about which market is most important for the wine world. What market is growing the fastest? And of course, we all know that's the US, and that trend has been going on for some time, has accelerated in the last few years. But if we talk about sheer numbers and look at the number one country for wine consumption, we have to say it's virtual. Facebook outpaces China, India, and so many other countries, including the US. So the sheer number of people that are online and markets that are available, it's changed the entire dynamic of the wine industry and how we have to think about moving product. Wine drinkers seem to be on social media heavier than other categories. And that, in many ways, is because wine is, by its very nature, a social topic. The wine industry needs to move from the agricultural space to really the virtual space in order to be able to grow and attain consumer market share. There's no avoiding this. So, how do we actually manage to create a successful social media program? If you've worked the US market for your brand with a distributor and you've been in accounts, you understand that you have to create a presentation, a story about your brand, and you have to build a relationship with an account. Much, much of the same for social media in order to reach both consumer and trade targets. But there is one other element. Not only do you have to communicate your story, you have to do a great job at listening. There is so much information out there, both about the industry at large, both about wine topics, both about, and also, of course, about your brand potentially. And if you're not responding and really thinking it through as to how you engage consumers both ways, you're not going to be able to have a successful program. If your entire social media effort is really about pushing information about your wine, your prices, your sales, that's not going to be effective. And in fact, you will turn off a good portion of the audience. So you have to craft a story. And in order to be able to really disseminate that story, you have to target several groups. B2B is very significant because the trade is online. And then, of course, your consumer targets, wine lovers. Aside from all that, we have worked with a lot of wineries around the world where we see their local websites. And as wineries come to the US or really expand their efforts here, They feel very comfortable that because they have an English language button on their domestic website, that that is going to be sufficient for the US market. That is not the case at all. In order to have a successful social media strategy, you need to have your website as a core center of your online efforts, both from an SEO standpoint, from a measuring standpoint, and also just because you are going to communicate a little bit differently to the US market. We had just the other day, we had a blogger reach out and say, make a comment online about a particular wine website that he was looking at, and he was looking for certain information and he couldn't find it. And he was ranting and raving about why can't wineries understand how the media and the trade needs to have information laid out. So that is essential part to the online communication platforms. We need to keep in mind that today it's not just desktops where we are going to be seen online. Not just Americans, but I think the whole world has really taken off on the smartphone access to the web. And if your website is not optimized, you're going to have many problems and you're going to be dropped from the conversation. This is how we see the entire online world. And of course, we can fill in with other platforms as they come to market. But these are primary social media platforms today that are a must for any winery. The website, as indicated, needs to be the center of the entire strategy. That is where you can really assess and measure your performance and, as well, in some ways, sales. Yes. There are two ways of creating a strategy. There is the online to offline and online to online. And I'll just give you an example of this. Online to offline is when you make an offer on one of your platforms or on your website where you are asking the consumer, the customer, to actually come to a facility, whether that's your winery or to a retail store or to an event. And that's going to be an actual offline event. The other way to utilize social media and your online strategy is to create an online to online program, in which case you would be marketing a product for which you want the consumer to take online action. Case in point would be selling a wine, assuming you're in a state where that can be done, and you're presenting it online and you're asking them to make a purchase. Or you're selling some peripheral branded winery products online and again, resulting in online purchase. To review core elements of social media strategy, think about having a great market strategy to start, because your social media strategy, your online media strategy will only be as good as your initial market strategy. And it has to align for both trade and consumer targets. In fact, all your marketing platforms, online and offline, should really be integrated and aligned. Then comes the story. The story is very particular to your brand and it has to be clearly communicated. If your story is full of things that everyone else is out there conveying, that's not going to make you unique in any way. You do want to inform and you want to communicate and engage, and mostly do listen. When there is something about your brand that is raised online, there is a problem or there is a comment, good or bad, it's really important to be responsive and to communicate quickly and directly with that customer or that journalist or whatever it may be. Responsiveness is highly valued, and that is something that many wineries are really looking at in terms of forging relationships. Of course, there is the measurement aspect, and this is not a perfect science. Social media is very much in flux and improving and growing and changing as technology advances. you need to look at what you're doing in your social media plan, and you need to assess regularly what is working, what is not working, and how to get better results. Be innovative and don't just accept something that you start at the beginning of the year as the full year plan. Continuously evaluate and then move forward. This is the ultimate question. What is the ROI on social media? Well, we can say for sure that all successful brands have an engaging social media program. They engage directly with the customer, and that component is critical to having a good brand. The problem is for those people who are questioning and are potentially not utilizing social media is that their competitors are definitely online. So you can develop brand loyalty by creating this successful social media program, and that will help you on your sales efforts. It will help you support any other marketing efforts that will be in place for your brand, and it will drive brand loyalty over time. Brand loyalty is not an overnight thing. And we talk about certain groups, demographic groups that potentially have less brand loyalty than in the past. And part of that problem is because there are so many options today. We only had a few wine brands 25 years ago. Today, consumer is king and they can go to whatever brand is going to service their needs best. So let's look at some aspects of social media because there are facts and myths. And the one I hear most often is that social media is free. It's free marketing, it's free advertising. It's free in terms of having access to the platforms. Utilizing the platforms well and effectively, that is not free. And it's becoming less free every single day. Most platforms today have advertising capability that allows you to communicate and target your message. But I'm not even referring to that aspect. The part that really is a cost that needs to be factored in is expertise and time. And in time, when we're talking about committing a certain amount of time to social media in order for it to be effective, that adds up very quickly. If you have someone on your team who is managing the social media for your brand, you have to look at what their actual roles are, what their salaries are, and calculate the hours that are being spent to do this program effectively. And then the expertise aspect is also very critical because social media can be done in so many ways. So you need to consider the real cost of social media, whether it's worthwhile in-house or if you're going to pursue hiring an outside agency. And this is what we were just talking about in terms of expertise. Can anyone use social media? And the answer, of course, is yes. Can anyone use social media effectively to move and sell a brand and to position a brand? The answer is absolutely not. This is real work and a serious time commitment and actual skills, both on the analytical side and on the content creation side. Then comes the last question on this topic is that, well, if we're far away, if you're in another market, Australia or South Africa or Europe, how effective can a social media program be that's directed at the US market from a country that far away? The answer is not very. You have to have on the ground capability because you're simply not going to be able to communicate many aspects of your brand program that is taking place in the market. Consistency is key in social media. So this is a fact. You have to continue the engagement or you will see your numbers drop off. And I'm not just talking about likes or followers. I'm talking about a measurement of how people are responding to your brand. Old school marketing principles are at the core of any market strategy. And social media is just one element of that. It's a very critical element and a growing element of that, but it is based on sound market strategy. So if you don't have a sound market strategy, that needs to be your first step. And then you have to do it. If you're not going to be engaged on social media, it is very, very likely that your competitive set will be. And that puts you in a position where your brand is losing out. That is not sustainable in the long term. Social media is here to stay. It's not a question of if we should do it, it's a question of how we should do it. And people are thinking maybe somewhere down the road as they build out their brand in a marketplace, that's when they should really build up their social media program. But that's not the case. In order to have an effective program, it takes about 6 to 12 months of building a foundation before it can really take off. So there's time that's invested in the vineyards. There is time that needs to be invested in your market building efforts as well. And lastly, we just have a few social media stats, and these are the most recent ones, and I'll just run through them super quickly. There are, as I indicated, 2.5 million organic online conversations every day that talk about wine, 63 times every minute for the US wine drinker. Can't ignore that. Most of the wine consumers use Facebook and use them significantly, almost an hour a day. 75% of all Americans use social media, and 80% of American wine consumers use social media. Those, again, are numbers you can't ignore. We've talked about millennials as a target group for the wine industry, particularly incoming new brands. It's great. They use social media all day long. And higher incomes also are more likely to use social media. So if you have a luxury brand or a brand that you're trying to move up, then you really have to be on the platforms. What we noticed over the last year is that while social media has always had significant amount of visuals in terms of pictures and videos and so forth, this is now growing so rapidly that most of the new platforms are completely social media, or rather visually or visually driven, either by pictures or video. So you can see something like Periscope, which is the newest tool. Certainly, Instagram is on the rise, and I can't stress enough that you have to have super good photography and ongoing photography at that to be able to communicate an in-depth story about your brand. Last number I will leave you with is that 140,000 wine labels were introduced in the US last year. You have to be part of that conversation in order to get your brand front and center or to even have a shot at the market. So thanks so much for joining me today, and looking forward to any questions you may have.